In the distant future, hotshot hero Sano participates in a violent racing game on Venus while Susan Summers, a bubbly reporter from Earth, arrives to report on the military tensions that have arisen between the northern continent of Ishtar and the southern nation of Aphrodite. She meets with her contact in an underground bar. He gives her a camera and a gun. Susan asks about the race on television. The bartender explains that it's a battle bike race between the Venusian barbarians and the killer commandos. Susan comments that you'd never get away with such a barbaric game on Earth. She gives the bartender some contraband cigarettes in exchange for information on the war. According to him, Aphrodite has suffered total defeat in a recent battle. Apparently, the Aphroditean capital of Io, where they are currently located, is about to be invaded by Ishtar's forces. Suddenly, the TV cuts out and the air raid siren rings throughout the city. The battle begins. An aircraft crashes near the stadium and Hero rides off to investigate. Meanwhile, Susan is excited to capture footage of the battle, and almost gets herself blown up in the process. But she's able to catch a ride with Hero's teammate Will. The campaign is over within a day and the city of Io falls under occupation of the Ishtar army. Susan finds shelter with Hero's team, while he and Maggie are out shopping together. They visit a shopping center Maggie really likes because of how it was decorated by the citizens of Io rather than the government. However, she's saddened to see the damage caused by the war, and then a gunfight breaks out right next to them. At the local press, Susan is told they can't use her photos and she realizes that the media is under Ishtar's control and refuses to transmit any problematic material. The chief editor tells her that the official word is that the government welcomed the occupation. She is warned that the Earth shuttle may stop operating within the next week, so she should probably head home as soon as possible. The Ishtar General Donner gives a speech to Aphrodite officials, telling them that the Great War to unite Venus has ended with their victory. He complains about recent acts of terrorism and resistance and threatens to dissolve Io's administration and police force if these attempts at resistance do not cease. A curfew is subsequently established. Hero visits his teammate Jack, who is staying at his uncle's high-rise. However, the police barge in and beat them up. Hero fights back and is able to escape, but he is chased down by a police robot. He is shot in the leg but manages to make it to Maggie's place before collapsing. Maggie uses her nursing skills to patch him up, but the two argue about Hero's parents' plantation. He contends that the terraforming farms funded by the Aphroditean government were actually frauds intended to secure land away from Ishtar, and that due to the planet's unpredictable weather patterns, the plants couldn't endure, contrary to what the politicians were saying. Maggie's father then returns home and Hero hides in a back room. Her father intends on having Maggie and himself evacuated from Io like he already did with her brother and mother. Maggie proclaims that she doesn't want to leave her friends behind, and when her father calls them worthless trash with no sense of responsibility, Hero leaves the house. Meanwhile, Jack is back with Will and the others who make fun of him for being busted by the police. Miranda, another member of the Killer Commandos team, arrives and searches the place for weapons after witnessing their manager Gary smuggling them into the city earlier. She finds a secret stash of anti-tank missiles and a variety of other weapons. As the gang starts playing with the guns, Gary walks in and tells them to put the weapons down and forget they ever saw them. Miranda shows herself defiant and tells him that she's going to borrow them for a while. She plans on blowing up the Ishtarian tank sitting on their stadium. Gary calls them idiots, but they remain determined. He reveals his robotic leg to demonstrate that he's been at war before and knows what he's talking about. Hero then arrives and asks Gary why he took on a tank years ago, trying to make the point that they're now in the same situation he was and are therefore also motivated to fight back. In the end, Gary decides to help them out, and the crew gets to work preparing their assault. They arrive at the stadium and start shooting the tank. They manage to lure it out and are seemingly able to blow it up using a truck full of oil. However, the tank remains intact and launches a counterattack. Jack starts freaking out and gets shot down. In response to this, Hero hops into a giant crane and basically slaps the tank in the face using the arm. He then grabs it and tries to drag it off the edge, but the tank keeps shooting at him. We'll tell Susan to record the whole thing as Gary goes in to save Hero. Soldiers evacuate the tank as it falls, bringing the crane down with it. Meanwhile, another tank shows up and attacks the others. As Hero tries to crawl out from underneath the crane wreckage, he sees a tank in the distance being destroyed. They are rescued by the Aphroditean Freedom Force using military motorcycles called FMBs. The Killer Commandos are recruited, and while Will is enjoying his time training with the military, Hero remains reluctant. The two of them get into an argument, and Susan even calls Hero a coward and says that since getting shot up once he's now too scared to go into battle, which seems like a pretty messed up thing to say to a guy who just took on a tank with a crane and barely survived a major fall that also killed his mentor. Fortunately, Miranda interrupts Sue's tirade by slapping her in the face. Aphrodite military leaders meet up to discuss plans to retake Io, and Lieutenant Kurtz organizes a battalion that will attack a heavily guarded supply division. Sue wants to come along but Will doesn't want her to. He comes up with the idea of mounting a camera onto his FMB. Sue and the others watch as Will leaves for battle. However, the camera cuts out and Will is killed. The operation is a complete failure. Lieutenant Kurtz meets with the general and says this was to be expected because the new recruits were not well trained enough. He says this is what you get when you treat them as expendables. Sue heads out on her own in search of Will, hoping he is actually still alive. Meanwhile, the others are given a talking to by Kurtz because they want to leave. He tells them they have to follow orders, and if they want to leave then the army will be forced to track them down and kill them so they don't divulge any secret information. Hiro tries to attack Kurtz but he's overpowered. Kurtz continues berating them for not wanting to fight for their nation. To motivate Hiro, Kurtz challenges him to a race through a canyon on their FMBs. He even gives Hiro a 10-second head start. In the end, Kurtz wins and so Hiro is forced to stay in the Freedom Force. But Miranda and the others return home. As the Aphrodite forces launch an attack on Io, Sue manages to meet with General Donner, requesting an interview for the independent press on Earth. Once alone with him, she pulls a gun out and threatens to kill him in order to avenge Will's death. However, Donner gives her a speech on the nature of war. He says that it isn't a commander or even a soldier who kills someone, it is war itself. All are guilty, none can be blamed. Enraged, she pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. Seizing on a moment of confusion, Donner is able to disarm her using an ashtray. Turns out, she had forgotten to turn the safety off. His guards then arrive and take her away. Meanwhile, uprisings have erupted all around the city and Hiro's squadron is almost there. Kurtz gives him a little motivational speech and then they head out for battle. Kurtz leads the assault on Donner's tank. He is knocked down, but Hiro rides in to cover him. Hiro then faces off with Donner one-on-one. He lures the tank to a large ramp and uses Donner's own power against him. As the tank fires shot after shot, it ends up destroying the ramp and debris comes falling down and crushes it. The Aphrodite offensive is a success and the city of Io is reclaimed. After the battle is over, Kurtz lends Hiro his ATV so he can ride into the city and rejoin the others. On his way, he sees Susan getting into a bus headed back to Earth. She tells him where Maggie is located. He then drives to the refugee camp and is finally reunited with her. That's all for today, folks. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next retro recap.